Welcome back, readers, to Mystery in Rocky Mountain National Park by Erin Johnson. We're reading Chapter 11, Emerald Lake. The next morning, Jake, Wes, and Amber reviewed their itinerary with Uncle Brian. He showed them how to strap on their snowshoes and check their gear. "You three look like you're ready to go," he said. "Get something hearty to eat, and then we'll head out in 30 minutes. After breakfast, they said goodbye to the rest of their parents and piled into Uncle Brian's Jeep. The road turned and twisted its way through the forest up the mountainside to Bear Lake, where a long parking lot was already filling with cars. The kids got out, reviewed their route on the map one more time, then said goodbye to Uncle Brian. "I'll meet you at the ranger station beside the lake at 1 o'clock. "See you then, Dad," Wes yelled as they ran across the parking lot toward the lake. The view at Bear Lake took them by surprise. The snow-capped mountains that had appeared so far away from the campsite now stood before them, their image reflected on the water's surface. Chipmunks ran about begging for food from the visitors, who were taking pictures of the landscape and posing for selfies to share with their friends. "We want to head south," said Amber. "That should be this way." She pointed to their left and began walking. The boys followed. "How did you know which way was south?" Jake asked. "It's pretty easy," she replied. "The mountains are in the west, so if we are facing the mountains, then north is to our right and south should be to our left." Wes held out a compass that hung around his neck and checked it. "She's right." Soon they encountered a sign pointing the way to Alberta Falls. The trail was busy with people, and because it was one of the more popular hikes, the snow had been packed down. In places, the snow gleamed like ice. Jake's boot found one of those spots. He lost his balance, falling backward into Wes, who caught him and stopped his fall. "Be careful, Jake. You just about smashed me like a bug." Wes clapped Jake on the back and laughed. "Thanks, Wes." Jake glanced at Amber to see if she had noticed, but she appeared to be looking at something up ahead. A group of people had stopped and were blocking the path. "Why are they just standing there?" Wes asked. "Because of that," Amber said, stepping forward so she could see better. A bighorn sheep stood right in the middle of the trail. Several more were coming down the steep hillside on their right. The sheep crossed to the other side and continued making their way down to the mountain. Wes pointed at them. "Did you know that bighorn sheep have rectangular pupils? It helps them see behind them." "Wes, you know the most random facts," Amber replied. "Those kinds of things just stick in my brain for some reason." Wes scrunched his mouth and shrugged. "I wish it was that easy to remember important stuff." After the bighorns finished crossing the trail, the group of hikers began moving again. Soon the sounds of water filled the kids' ears. They came around a bend, and the falls came into view. Swollen with the early summer snowmelt, the waters of Glacier Creek shot from a rock outcrop into the air, creating a stunning waterfall. They stood at the overlook, taking in the sights and sounds. "How far have we gone?" Jake asked. "It's about 1.5 miles from Bear Lake to here at Alberta Falls," Amber replied. "And that means we're about halfway to the next lake," Wes added. "What's its name again? All I remember is it sounds like the sound you make when you do a karate chop." Jake and Amber laughed. "It's Lake Hayaha." Jake had already started moving down the trail. "Let's keep going." Past the waterfall, there were fewer people. The trail was less packed down, but they could still travel without their snowshoes. Though the sky was blue, light snow had started to fall. Amber held out her gloved hand to catch the flakes and watch them melt on its surface. "Was it supposed to snow today?" Wes pressed his palm to his forehead and sighed. "We totally forgot to check the weather." Jake stared at the dark gray band of clouds that had appeared behind the mountains. "I wonder if the wind is blowing the snow in from those clouds." Amber looked up at the darkening sky. "I bet you're right, Jake. We should keep our eyes on it." They soon came to a sign that pointed to the right and read Lake Hayaha, 1.3 miles. Taking the trail, they immediately found that it was thick with fluffy snow. So they unstrapped the snowshoes from their packs, fastened them to their boots, and continued their hike toward the lake. As the trail narrowed, the snow became deeper, and their pace slowed. Amber was in the front. Jake had already stopped himself from saying anything about how tough the hike had become. He saw the look of relief on Wes's face when Amber turned around and said, "We should probably take a little break." They sat on some rocks, drank water from their water bottles, and shared a bag of granola. I bet we're close to the halfway point by now. Wes took in the aspen forest that surrounded them. Did you guys notice that we haven't passed a person in a long time? Jake had noticed. It was weird to be so far away from the sounds of other voices. The deep blanket of snow made everything soft and quiet. So if we are halfway, then it should be around 11 o'clock, he said. Amber looked at her watch. It's 10:45, but this snow is slowing us down. We should speed things up a bit. Jake and Wes nodded in agreement, though neither was ready to hike much faster. They were already feeling the effects of the altitude and the sting of the cold air in their lungs. Jake's legs were starting to feel a little shaky, but he stood up and did his best to keep up with Amber. 10 minutes up the trail, they came to a sign pointing the way to Lake Hyaha. After taking the side trail, they were soon standing along its rocky shore. Amber rested her hands on her hips. Wow, this was worth the hike up here. It's beautiful. Huge boulders were scattered about the shore of the lake. Ice still covered most of its surface, except in the middle where the deep green circle of water showed through the melted ice sheet. This place is cool. Jake took a deep breath as he scanned the frozen lake. It really feels like we're in the mountains. Amber didn't respond. She was watching the sky. Wes glanced up too. Looks like more snow is coming, doesn't it? It does, Amber replied. If it gets worse, we could just skip the side trail to Emerald Lake. That would cut a mile off our trip. We can make it, Jake said. We've just got to get moving. He tightened his snowshoe straps and started hiking back to the trail. Wes held up his gloved hands. But we just got here. Jake's heart beat faster. We can't miss Emerald Lake. Amber turned to face Jake. Why not? Just because. I want to see it. Jake tried not to sound so anxious as he felt. Is it about your Morse code thing? Wes asked. Amber heard the words Morse code and looked interested. What Morse code thing? She asked. Jake had a note back in his camper that was written in Morse code, Wes explained. Did you decode it? She asked. We did, Wes answered, and it said Emerald Roots. I asked Jake what it meant, but he seemed like he didn't want to talk about it. I just want to see the lake, okay? Jake really wanted to avoid any more conversation about the clue. We've already come this far, and I don't want to skip it. So let's get going. Amber looked at Wes and whispered, What's up with him? Wes shrugged his shoulders. They put their packs back on and followed Jake. After crossing the creek that flowed out of Lake Hyaha, the trail became steep again. Gray clouds filled the sky, and the snow was falling in big, thick flakes. More snow covered the path, and their pace slowed. After an hour, they arrived at Dream Lake. Here, a sign with an arrow pointed to Emerald Lake, 0.6 mile, and another arrow pointed to the opposite direction that read Bear Lake, 1.1 miles. Wes started to take off his pack to take a break when Jake said in a hurried voice, It's super close. Let's keep going. Wait, Amber interrupted. This is really important. It's 11:30 and the weather is getting worse. We really need to talk about this and make a good decision, Jake. We can totally do this, Amber, he replied. Maybe we can, but we need to stop for a minute and make a decision together. Okay, Jake relented, but it made him feel even more anxious. So we have to be back by 1 o'clock, or our parents may not let us do this again. Amber tugged on her gloves. And with the snow, they might already be getting worried about us, Wes added. I think we can do it, Amber looked at Jake, but we need to agree that if the snow gets worse, we'll turn back. Okay, Jake nodded. If it gets bad, I promise we'll turn around. As they hiked toward Emerald Lake, the wind picked up and the snow started to swirl around them. They passed two hikers traveling in the opposite direction. It's pretty up here, one of the hikers said, but be careful. The snow was starting to cover the trail. Thanks for letting us know, Jake replied. Sure thing, the hiker said. You guys are close. It's right up ahead. A few minutes later, Emerald Lake came into view. High above its green waters, jagged pinnacles of rock appeared through the snow. Thick fog streamed down the mountainside toward them, and the wind was so strong and cold that it stung their faces. Through the fog and snow, Jake glimpsed the gray limbs of an old tree. He plunged into the biting wind and made his way toward it. Moments later, he heard his name, Jake! Amber and Wes were calling for him. He looked over his shoulder toward the voices, but everything behind him was enveloped in a dense fog. I'm this way, he yelled over the gust of ice and wind. Then before him the form of a tree materialized like a ghost in the mist. Its gray and twisted arms had been shaped by years of storm winds bending to the east. A few green needles remained in bunches on the tree, proof that the ancient pine was still a living thing. Jake, the voices called again through the fog. I'm over this way. The two figures emerged from the mist. Jake, we have got to go. Amber's voice sounded angry. This is getting really serious. I just need a few minutes, Jake yelled over the low roar of the wind. For what? She asked. I'm trying to find something. Whatever it is, you're not going to find it in this weather, Amber shook her head. It's getting darker, and you promised. Jake, we are getting cold. Wes's voice was shaky. We really need to head back now. Jake could now make out the twisted trunk of the pine and could see a web of roots that crawled over the rock and dirt below it. He ran towards it, and Amber and Wes followed. Amber hit Jake with the back of her glove. Jake, you're not listening to us. I know, I'm sorry, I just have to find this. Amber grabbed his shoulder of Jake's jacket and pulled him around. Jake, what is going on? You're putting us in danger, and you're not telling us why. It's about the Morse code, isn't it? Wes rubbed his arms, trying to keep warm. If you're going to make us wait here in the cold, we deserve to know what's going on. Jake tried to think of how he could keep it a secret, but every option felt like a lie. He had to tell them the truth, at least part of it. It's a scavenger hunt. My grandpa left me clues, and the one in Morse code led me here. So you think there is another clue hidden somewhere near this tree? Amber asked. Jake nodded, still afraid they would think this whole thing was stupid and would make him give up and miss this chance to find the next clue. 5 minutes. Amber sounded like a teacher demanding all pencils down. We'll help you look for 5 minutes. After that, we leave, no matter what. Agreed? Agreed, Jake replied. Thanks, Amber. I'm sorry for... We don't have time for apologies right now, Jake. Just tell us what to do. I think there's something hidden behind those roots. Help me dig. They began scraping the snow away to reveal an even larger web of roots twisting over an area 10 feet wide. They reached through the holes between the roots, digging with their gloved hands into the void behind them. Their fingers touched nothing but dirt, rock, and sand. Wait, I think I found something, Wes called out above the sound of the wind. It feels like glass. He pushed his arm through the roots as far as he could. It's just at my fingertips. Wes struggled to reach it. My arms are longer, said Amber. Let me try. Wes moved out of the way. Amber plunged her hand through the hole. I've got it. And that's where the chapter ends. We'll read chapter 12 next time.